Hey, good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Excellent, excellent. All right. So we're kind of a little bit behind and everything, and we're just gonna do it as is. We'll get there. We may end up having an extra class later. Um, so don't worry about it. Hold on just one second here. I got up, I was up super late last night because one of my good friends is having a medical emergency and I had to pick them up from the airport last night. And so they were flying in from abroad, and then we took them to the hospital. They're going to be fine, but it was definitely a late night. So my apologies for being a little late and being a little tired this morning. So um last week, and it actually applies into this class today, is we talked about the process by which we fall into an idea, and sort of an innate idea that we're already born with, which is things are coming from themselves. And it's not like you have to try, right? You all don't have to try to see it that way. You don't have to wake up and decide, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to decide that everything is coming from itself, right? You don't go, I'm going to see that and see how I'm not paying attention to it. And I'm not going to pay attention to how it really works. I'm going to decide how it doesn't work, right? And that's not what Maitreya said, is that the moment we're born, we begin with this tendency to see things incorrectly. The seed is already there, right? And so it starts to assert itself. And there's a whole process where, like, you see something or you experience something, and then you experience it as coming from the wrong way. And then you start having a feeling about it, and then you like it or dislike it ignorantly, right? And then all of a sudden you're you'll do things to keep it or make it go away. And it's kind of depressing, frankly. Right? It's kind of depressing, but that's what we're saying here, and this is what Shantideva goes into in extensive. We go into a lot deeper into this class. But I want to finish a couple other items from last class before we move on here. Um, and we started this briefly last week, and I'm just going to kind of go into it again, just so we have the arguments. So there's a long, long discussion, and it happens between different schools, and 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 oftentimes you'll hear people talk about Hinayana, or you'll hear them talk about Mahayana. You'll hear them talking about the lower path and then the higher path. And we've and what ends up happening, like if you talk about this in a not sensitive way, it can sound very much like you're criticizing other people. The Hinayana teachings made it to certain areas of the world and are still thriving, but the Mahayana did not make them there. And it kind of makes it sound like, oh, it's the lower way, right? And we oftentimes, when we hear these words, we hear lower as inferior. And sure, there's a limitation to those teachings, but those teachings also can get you to nirvana. which is like is where all of your negative emotions are gone. So does that sound like lower to anybody? Does anyone here not have negative emotions? If you are, you look like you are. Did anyone raise their hand? Marina's smiling. She's having a negative emotion because I said something that wasn't true, and she's telling me it wasn't true, and she was right and I was wrong. So she's having a negative emotion right now. Let's see here. Is anyone else having one? Or not, are completely free? If you were completely free of negative emotion, would you be sitting here in this class? Can we check? Let me look at all the pictures here. Let's see. I mean, maybe you would be here pretending to be, a student and learning so that the rest of us, people who have negative emotions, can learn something maybe, right? But, think about it. Like, it's not lower in the sense of you can't get somewhere with it. Like, the teachings are profound. Like, a Christian's having such a negative emotion, he's covering his face. Oh, he was just frozen. Yeah, there we go. The limitation, we'll say limitation, right, is that there's two main obstacles to reaching total matchless enlightenment. One is your negative emotions, and the second thing is your omniscience. And the lower teachings can get you through the first obstacle, can get you through all the way to nirvana, all the way to removing all of your negative emotions. So great, wonderful. Okay. They just are missing a few things that take you to the final goal. So anyhow, because even though we're debating, I think we're pulling, what's the expression? Splitting straws, splitting hairs, excuse me. Like, in splitting a hair translator, like you take a hair which is really thin and let's split it in half. It's still really thin, right? So there are debates in the text about it. And one of the questions is about whether or not the Mahayana is true or not. And again, there's a whole long debate, historical debate, of whether or not the Mahayana was spoken by the Buddha or not. Or was it a school that showed up, after Arya Sangha or after Arya Nagarjuna, right? There's historical debates about it, and we're not going to get into them, and we can get into them at some later date. But some people would say, well, the Mahayana is not true because it was spoken later, which is, kind of inaccurate because the Buddha did speak it in the sutras. But that's a different story. But the point is that there's a question about whether or not the greater way is true. And in the Perfection of Wisdom, which is a Mahayana teaching, Mother Sutras, like, it's actually called the Sutra of the Mother. It's a text that proves, this is a Mahayana text that says you need to see emptiness directly to remove all of those negative emotions. And if you don't see emptiness directly, you can't even reach nirvana. And this is a Mahayana text that says this point, which both the Hinayana and the Mahayana accept. Okay. again, we're kind of splitting straws here, but splitting hairs, excuse me. But it gets you into a mindset of why people would take certain texts and say, these are the true ones and these are not the true ones. Okay. Now, if you think about it, like what happens when someone starts having a discussion or an argument about my texts are true and your texts are not? What starts happening? You all look kind of bored today. Right. Conflicts start happening, splitting up, schisms start happening. Right. When someone starts saying, well, this one is better than this other one. And then you start having people shoot bombs at each other. I mean, this is something that's been going on for, for ages. Let's solve our problems by shooting bombs at each other. You are going to pay for you sent a bomb to us, so we're going to send 10,000 to you. Okay, like, where's the humanity in that? And then when you split hairs on small things, like what ends up happening? Then you get so angry that you forget about what your text actually said about how to behave. Like if you started a war between the Mahayana and the Hinayana over this, which ones are true, right? Then we're just going to be disregarding, I don't know, the 10 virtues, right? Then you start thinking, well, maybe it's okay to kill those people that don't believe what we believe because they're wrong and they're spreading wrong ideas. Right? And then all of a sudden you're going against the teachings in your own text, the teachings of your own God or your own religion, right? So that's why we're talking about this. And the Mahayana texts actually consider the Hinayana text to be part of the Mahayana texts. They're not separating them. They're part of the path that is shared, saying, yeah, if you study this, you can get rid of all your negative emotions. Good, go for it. Here we all are, all 60 of us, right? Yeah, go do that. Go study that. And let me know how it goes. And then if you need a little bit extra bodhicitta at the end, let's talk about that. Right. So the first kind of argument against this is, well, the Mahayana texts actually talk about the need to see emptiness directly to reach nirvana. So how could you say they're not true? Right. That's the first point. The second point is, and this is why we started the class where we started the class, is they use a kind of argumentation, which we talked about last week. It was the picture of the two tracks going next to each other. And this is why ACI 13 is going to be fun. And you're all going to love it. And none of you are going to quit. Okay. It's the class where a lot of people quit. So don't quit. Shib, don't quit. Okay. I love your little, your, who's that joining class? Like your little stuffed duck. Oh, nice. Okay. All right. Everyone can receive Dharma, even stuffed animals. Is they basically say the Hinayana use an argument that actually doesn't prove anything. The people that are fighting and saying, well, the Hinayana, the Mahayana texts aren't true. The argument that they use is focused on an idea that you don't come out of you're not born, and then you come out and the first thing you say are, I accept the Hinayana teachings, right? The first thing a baby thinks, right, is the Hinayana teachings, I accept those. What is like it's really kind of an insane thing to say. But their argument is based upon the idea that someone learns a certain group of teachings and then they come to accept them later in life. They learn them and say, yes, this is what I believe in. And so the Mahayana says, but wait a second, learning all of these things are already something you learn. I mean, to accept a point of view, you have to be taught it. Okay. And so what they're saying is how they come to believe in their text is the same way someone would come to believe in the Mahayana text. So their argumentation makes no sense. They're using what they say parallel argumentation. They're proving once they're debating one side and saying they're not doing that same thing. And so what they're within that learned behavior is that the tests that we use to determine whether a scripture is authoritative or not are identical in Hinayana and Mahayana. So let me say that again, just in case you're missing what I'm saying. Once the Hinayana people learn their texts, and then all of a sudden you put your whole library up. I moved my library the other day, right? I took my library from here, moved it to the new house. I'm not done yet with everything, right? They have their library of texts that say, these are the texts that we say are our religion, right? Are the things that we believe. And then they use different methods to determine the authenticity or the authority of those texts, or of those texts, excuse me. And one of those tests is that it has to align with the three collections, like the three baskets of teachings, right? And so they say, well, these texts align, so therefore these are our texts. And you have to read them, you have to study them, you have to apply those tests. The Mahayana people say the same thing. They're using the same exact tests to evaluate the authority of their texts. I'm sorry, translators, they sound like the same words, tests and texts. Okay, just slightly different pronunciations. They use the same methodology to evaluate their texts. Okay, so both of them are using the same methodology. So how can you say my scriptures are not authoritative if we're using the same methodology? You see, does that make sense? And so there's what we're calling parallel argumentation. They're saying, hey, we use this methodology to say this bookshelf is ours. And then Mahayana says, well, yeah, we use the same methodology to say those texts are ours, and also here are some other ones as well that you excluded for whatever reason. Right? So again, why? Like, why are we talking about this? And there's several, as I said, there's several reasons. One is look at our life and look at how we evaluate people that are part of our community and the people that we define as not part of our community. These are my peeps. These are my peoples. And those aren't my peoples. Well, why aren't they your peoples, Tim? Well, they look different than me. They live a little bit differently than I do. Maybe, their hair is different, the color of their skin is different, the shape of their bodies are a little bit different. You know, they do these little rituals that are different than my rituals, right? They maybe pray differently than I do, right? So those aren't my peoples. These are my people, right? Oh, so Tim, how do you define what are your people? Well, it's because we look the same. We have the same color skin, the same type of hair. You know, we speak a similar language, right? We vote for the same politicians. Okay. Those are my people. I'm only friends with my people, right? And all those other people, they're idiots. I don't like them. I don't, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just using an example, right? And so then when you walk over to the other people who are not your people and you ask those people the same questions, they will give you the same exact answer, right? They'll say, well, we look like this. We believe in these things. We do these, this is how we live. This is what we look like. These are the clothes that we wear. These are the politicians we vote for, right? And so now you have two groups using the same criteria to establish their own unique identity. I'm really surprised the translators haven't yelled at me yet for being too fast. Right. So now those things that create unique identities are subject to evaluation. And you can say, wait a second, they're using the same factors to determine the ways to create divisions between each other. So how are we actually any different? Right? Are we doing different things? No, we're doing the same exact thing. Which group wins? The one that has the most bombs or the one that fights first? Okay. The and I'm not bashing on any one group right now because if you look over the history of humanity, it hasn't been that different. Right? Even Buddhists were fighting each other. Okay. Even within their own groups, like, oh, we're Buddhists. Well, we're this type of Buddhist and we're this type of Buddhist. You hear it today. There's like, well, we're Galupas or we're Nyingmas or we're Kagyus. And then they start criticizing each other inside. I won't talk to a Galupa. Well, why? Well, because they criticized me in 1928. One of their main lamas criticized me. So, oh, okay. Right. So all of a sudden now you have groups that the groups have created themselves in the same, each group has created themselves in the same exact way, right? Using the same criteria. And then it creates a path to negative karma, doing things that will hurt other people. Right. And that's the point that Maitreya makes is you're already in ignorance, right? You think people's differences are coming from themselves. Those people over there, well, they look different. They speak a different language. Or they wear different clothes. Oh, they do these weird religious rituals. Mine are on Sunday. Theirs are on Saturday. Like, how silly does that sound? So I'm going to defend that Sunday is the day that we should rest and not Saturdays. Okay. Like it sounds really dumb when you break it down like that. But now I'm willing to go to bat and fight and defend for Sunday over Saturday. Right. So that's where we're really going here, is that these innate wrong ways of thinking, basically moving down to the idea of where things are coming from, cause us to do things to hurt other people. Take it to your work office, take it to your family. One of my friends, I shouldn't have said anything, but they were like, they're visiting, their whole family came into town, right? And they were like, everything's been going great. And I was like, how long have you been together? Oh, 3 days. And I said, oh, my grandmother used to say, family and fish are the same. After 3 days, they both start to stink. Okay. And there was a little family thing at the end of in the fourth day, they had a thing, right? But look about what happens in families. Like people disagree with each other, right? Oh, we're family, but we vote for different politicians, or we vote, or we live different lifestyles. Like you don't have to go to like large country wars to see it. You see it in your own families. Like, oh, well, I'm actually, I kind of believe in this Buddhist thing, but most of my family is kind of Christian. How do you deal with that? Right? How do you deal with at the workplace, like the people you like and the people you don't like? Every group of people, you will have some people you like and some people you don't like, and some people that are just kind of whatever, neutral. You don't really think one thing or another about them. That's why this is relevant. I mean, who cares how the Hinayana and Mahayanas fought, 2,000 years ago? Or do we do care? Right. Now, one thing that starts happening is a similar kind of division will happen for meditators. How many meditation systems are there? How many meditation apps are there? Right. My meditation does this. My meditation does that. Right. But what the whole point of all this is that if your meditation is not something that is going to cut that root of ignorance, you will have an experience. You might relax a little bit, you might get a little calm, but if you're not cutting out that root of misunderstanding, it will still reassert itself. How many people are great meditators and still get irritated? Oh, look at the smiles. Oh, I meditate every day, but for some reason I still get irritated. All right, good job. Admit admit your shortcomings. The best thing to do is admit how much your mind irritates itself because it sees things incorrectly. So we're saying that don't waste your time with things that don't cut that ignorance out, that are not teaching you to figure out how to stop the misunderstanding. You know, should I just do breath meditation? Okay. Does breath meditation stop your negative thinking? Oh, Tim, I have high blood pressure. Okay, let's do some belly breathing. Ready? You know, if you do some deep belly breathing, slow down, it can bring down your blood pressure. Does it? Does it always bring down your blood pressure? Most of the time it works. My friend who was sick last night had a blood pressure of like 170 over 90, which is huge, high, super high. And she's a great meditator. And I could see her breathing. She was like trying to stay calm, wasn't working, right? Because it's not actually the cause. But you can have calmer body and mind by breathing. That's why we breathe at the beginning of a meditation. But it's not the only thing, right? Coming out of a meditation and feeling good is a good thing. And it's something that will happen or can happen. But it doesn't stop you getting angry when someone cuts you off on the highway, right? It doesn't cut at that root. And so what we're saying is, don't waste your time on activities that aren't going to cut it out. And yes, there are practice, and yes, they take time, and yes, they take time to integrate. I'm not criticizing anyone, because those meditations can help you get to a state where you're able to see the way you are creating your world. But if you don't actually stop it, then you're just going to get irritated again. You're still going to get upset again. And then you're going to quit meditating. I know a lot of people who used to meditate and say, well, it didn't work for me. And I said, well, what kind of meditations were you doing? And then they tell me, and I'd be like, well, yeah, because you're not doing other things to support good meditation. And we'll talk about that in our meditation teacher trainings. And then there's one thing that happens, and it happens to a lot of practitioners, is as you start approaching this idea that nothing has a self nature, nothing exists by itself on its own. Especially in meditation. And when you start touching this a little bit, if one of the emotions that can come up is that people have a sense of destabilization of who they are, and an emotion of fear arises. And there's stories in the Lam Rim of people understanding emptiness so well that they're in meditation and then they grab onto their clothes. They're like, I gotta check to make sure I'm still real, right? Like they're doing such a good meditation that some part of their mind thinks, oh my God, I'm gonna lose myself. And then they grab onto their clothes or they grab onto their body to make sure that they're still real. Okay. So this fear that comes up is a natural kind of reaction. And if you get it, you're on the right path. Okay. You're because all of a sudden you're having resistances to it. But Shantideva says, look, that's one little fear. But if you look at what self-existent point of view does, it's the cause of all suffering, right? That thing where you are aware that everything is out there on its own is the cause for suffering, right? And you should be frightened of that. You should be frightened of the thing that causes all the suffering you have, not this little moment where, you feel like you're going to lose yourself. You don't lose yourself. And we're going to talk about what you lose when you see emptiness directly in just a moment. But you lose, but there's this primal fear that arises, and it's normal. And make sure, talk to your teacher about it if you have it, because that fear can stop you if you don't, if you, because what happens is you think you're not going to exist. Like in a deep state of meditation, you lose the awareness of the world, you lose awareness of your body, your senses shut down, you go deeper and deeper in, and then you're working on this level of what is the self, what is me, and if you cancel me, what's left, right? And then you go, oh shit, nothing, and then that throws you out of the meditation, and then you check to make sure you're still here, right? And you are still there. It's But your understanding of where it comes from changes. It can change. And so it's a very natural reaction to happen in a meditation. But you should be more afraid of not getting there, because you will just continue to cycle around in suffering over and over again. All right. Okay. We just finished last class. Yay. 40 minutes in. Why do I got a thumbs up? What the hell's going on here? Right. Apparently I had a reaction. Okay. Now I have a lot more. There you go. All right. So so basically there's two types of, how do we call it? There's two types of ways in which this idea, or this, I don't have in my notes here. There's two forms, that's the word I'm looking for. There's two forms of this tendency to hold that things exist on their own. Okay, there's two different types. And we have to split them up, because one of those types gets annihilated when you see emptiness directly, and one of them does not. All right. So the first type is called, what's it in Tibetan? Tenzin Kuntak. Tenzin is the tendency to hold to a self, and Kuntak means, generally, we use it in the mind-only school in a different way, but generally means the tendency to hold to things as self-existent because you learned it in life. Okay. So for example, we have one of our students here has their child listening to class, right? And that child was born and then kind of came out blank and learned a certain type of belief systems. I don't know what Z taught her daughter. I have no idea, right? But think about these learned beliefs of, we're not talking about, well, like how you live your life. We're talking about belief systems. Mainly, we're talking about how the world started. How did we get here? Like, kids are really great at asking is like, where did I come from? Right. Then you got to figure out cool ways to talk about how they were made, for example, right? And then you need to, and then the questions start getting more, intense. Well, where do we go when we die? Where was I before I was born? Right. And certain belief systems are built into certain cultures, you see. So, for example, where did the world come from? What about the Big Bang? How about that? That's one good belief system. The world started with the Big Bang. We all came from the Big Bang. We came from this infinitesimally small dot in the universe where there wasn't a universe, and then it exploded for some reason. And then all the matter in the universe came from there and exploded. And then the whole universe started expanding. Right. And as that universe expanded, some of those molecules, which were super small, right, they were all in like a tiny singularity, expanded. And now the universe continues to expand. And then we started having suns and solar systems, and then planets. And then the planets started, some of them have life on them. Right. And then somehow you became you. Okay. Right. That's how you, and then everything started organizing, and then life started happening in the oceans, right? And then DNA started forming, and different DNAs adapted in some way, and then all of a sudden there were fish, and then there were larger fish, and then there were reptiles on land. And those reptiles, some of them turned into birds, and some of them turned into animals. And then a meteorite killed a lot of those animals, and then more animals showed up, and then humans showed up. You see, it's a belief system, right? And it makes sense in some ways, right? And I'm not, evolution could have happened that way. That's fine. But does that point of view get you out of suffering? Well, we try. I was at the Mayo Clinic last night, and beautiful hospital, wonderful people. You know, we're now going to do surgeries. We're going to give you some medicines. We're going to do these things, right? And you're going to feel better, right? Well, my friend will feel better in a couple of days, of course. But is that going to stop my friend from getting older and dying? I don't know. I don't think the Mayo Clinic offers that service. You don't go in and they're like, oh, you get to come out happy. Like, you get to be happy, right? No, I mean, sometimes surgeries go sideways. Sometimes people don't make it. Everyone that I know keeps getting older and dies. You know, the Big Bang is great as an explanation. And I'm not dissing science, but does it stop your negative emotions? Does it stop? Can it even stop death itself? I don't know. I haven't seen that happen. Doesn't mean it can't, but I haven't seen that happen. So, you know, asking the question of where the world came from, like, where was I before and where was I after? Where will I go afterwards? Right? This is what we're talking about, the learned tendency to see things as self-existent. Well, where did you come from? Well, mom and dad created me, and then my soul went into my body, right? And then my soul stayed in my body. And if I was a good person, when I die, that soul leaves and then goes to heaven or hell, right? Perfect. That's good. It teaches you to be a good person. If you're a good person, you get to live eternal life and, next to God and all the other people who live good lives. And if you were a bad person, you get to walk on burning embers in the inferno of hell with all the other people that were bad. But you are still you. You are still something, right? I asked my priest, I said, where does the soul come from if we're only looking at the future, right? If everyone goes to heaven or hell, that's fine. That sounds nice. Be a good person. But where was I before that? Did the souls from heaven come back down and reincarnate into bodies? Or was I just created in that moment as an image of God, and then heaven is like an overcrowded hotel, right? Just more and more souls keep showing up. Sounds like a hell. That's great, Mike. Right? More and more souls just keep showing up in heaven or hell or both. But where were they created from? Where did they come from? Were you just hanging out? Like there's like souls hanging out to be born, and then they get born and then they go to this good place or bad place. But where were they before? Priest couldn't answer me, by the way. Right? But it's a valid question. Valid question for a 13-year-old. The math doesn't make any sense. Is it a bad idea to live, to be taught something so that you become a better human being and you take care of other people? No, it's a great idea. Okay. It's a wonderful idea. The people who subscribe to those ideas, many of them are great, wonderful people, and I like them and I like hanging out with them. My parents are that group, right? I like my parents, right? I wonder if they're listening. Probably not. Mom. Yeah, no, she wouldn't put her name as mom. No, no, they're not here. Okay, right? They're great people. Many great people, right? But when you begin to evaluate the belief systems, they start to the ideas start to run into each other. By the way, this is the basis of advanced level 3 in DCI. How do you establish a belief system? How do you evaluate a belief system? You know, for me, that one question that I asked my priest that he couldn't give me the answer to satisfactorily, you know, was like, no, I want to find out what actually is going on. Okay? Because it didn't make any sense to me. The math made no sense. Are they good people? Yes. Do I still go to church? Yes. Do I like it? Yes. Right? Lots of good things. But these are learned philosophical beliefs that we carry with us without really reflecting on them. Right? That's the Tenpa Kuntak, right? The things that we learn that explain the world, right? Like, for example, if someone, I don't know, a baby is born and somehow is raised by wolves or coyotes or monkeys or something like that, right? We have stories like that. That person grows up, all of a sudden they're 25 years old and someone finds the kid raised by wolves, or, you know, the kid raised by monkeys. What would that person believe about the world? You know, would they believe in heaven afterwards? Would they believe in the Big Bang? Right? What would they believe in? Right? They wouldn't have learned those things. They would have learned wolf things, or they would have learned coyote things or monkey things, whatever belief systems that monkeys have. Right? I don't know what belief systems monkeys have. But you see, these ideas that we teach the next generations, right? That's this learned. This is the learned part of self-existence, right? Like science teaches us everything came from a big bang. Great. Okay, wonderful. You know, some religions teach us that there's a God in a certain place and we go there. Okay, great. Right? You can figure those things out for yourself, what those are. And I'm sure you have them too. Right? And if you're a parent, you know that you're teaching your children things because they ask questions and you don't have the answers to them. Right? And maybe you say things, maybe you don't. But we learn, these are things that are learned. So then the other part of it, the opposite side, is what we were talking about in last class, which is the innate version. The part of you, the Tensen Lenke, the part of you that was born with these things. And it's in your mind from the beginning. You are simply born with it. You wake up as in the it's you wake up aware, and in that awareness you have this innate tendency, which we talked about last week, right? Which was basically what Maitreya said, right? That you just have a tendency to grasp the me and mine. The me and my parts are there, right? You start seeing the world in a self-existent way. You don't have to be taught it. The child who is raised by wolves thinks the wolves are out there on their own. The things that wolves do, right? They're seeing that world as out there, not have anything to do with their own seeds, right? They're not co-conspirators in the creation of what's out there, right? They're not even part of it at all. So we have these two, and it's important. Why is it important when we have these two? Because when you see emptiness directly, which one goes away? Which one? The kuntak, the learned one, or the innate one? Learned or innate? Which one goes away? Which one do you no longer believe? Nope, it's not both. When you see emptiness directly, that the first one, the learned one, gets knocked out. Your belief in all of those things you learned about how the world works, you no longer believe it. The innate one takes a lot longer to dispel. So after you see emptiness directly and you come out of that experience and you're looking at the world again, you're still seeing the world as self-existent. You're still seeing things as coming from themselves, but you don't believe it anymore. You know that you're wrong. You 100% know that you're wrong. But you still have this tendency to see things like you had this innate way of seeing things incorrectly. Now, it doesn't mean that the learned things aren't somewhat functional, right? The science of our modern age is based upon some kind of self-existence, but it seems to work, right? I'm not saying don't study science. I'm not saying don't go into medicine. I'm not saying don't do those things. But understanding where they come from. And the thing about science, like, has anyone ever picked up like a textbook from 1950? Have you ever looked at one of these books, like science books or even history books? Come on. I'm going to turn this thing off. Don't recognize hand gestures. Okay. They're really funny because a lot of the stuff in there just isn't true anymore because science is different. You know, in 50 years, 100 years, the world will be completely different. And the things that you believe now about the way the world works will be completely different, right? And it doesn't mean let's not continue to investigate the physical world. That's not what we're saying at all. You get to do pretty cool things, right? Because of science. Well, it's not, we won't say because of, but we have cool things like this. We get to have Zoom calls. Great. That's wonderful. I get to meet a lot of people I never would have met in life. I follow some of you on Instagram, so I know something about your life or what you think, and I would never have met many of you. But was it science that created Zoom? Was it a computer programmer? Yes. But why? Like, if you keep asking the why, this is where it kind of starts breaking down. And in the ancient texts, they talk about, there's this whole thing, there's this whole series of discussions of when you become a great meditator, when you understand emptiness and karma really well, you start to develop capacities that look like they're supernatural. Like, you can look at people and know what's going on for them. You can understand what their negative emotions are. You can understand what their blocks are. What do they need to purify? Some people can hear things at long distance. Some people can read people's minds. They have different things, like people that can run really fast, or you can move through walls, or things like that. Like cities, they call them, like extraordinary powers. I don't know, walk on water, right? We've heard of that one. If somebody from 2000 years ago showed up in 2024 and they studied all of these things, they would say, oh my God, look at the great seeds these people have. We can fly around the world in less than 24 hours. You can get anywhere in the entire world in less than 24 hours. I mean, okay, yeah, you might have to drive 5 hours to an airport. I get it. It may be a little bit more than that. But if you're at an airport, you can get anywhere in the world in less than 24 hours. Maybe not all of Antarctica. I don't know. That's pretty amazing. People who lived 2000 years ago, to travel, you know, they could travel in boats, maybe. They had to walk. They had, horses. Maybe they had donkeys, right? How long did it take to cross the Himalayan mountains from Tibet to India on foot? Like, how long did it take for a message to get from one side of Asia to the other side of Asia? Oh, come help us. We're having a war. The message shows up 2 years later. Then they send armies, which take 15 years to march across Asia. So now 17 years have passed. And they show up in this town and they're like, what? Wait, you said there was a war. What's going on? I'm like, well, dude, that ended 16 years ago. Everyone was killed except for one person. Right? You see, we're all around the world right now and we're talking to each other instantaneously. That sounds like great seeds to me. That sounds like cities, but we don't see it that way. 2000 years ago, to get a message across the world could take in 20, 30, 40 years, right? If they even traveled around the world. Now we can get a message there instantaneously. Why? Because I can explain the science behind it. But they would say we have incredible seeds already. Like, look how amazing it is that we can, how amazing it is, how much information you can get within 5 seconds. And amazingly accurate, also amazingly inaccurate information. We haven't figured out how to stop the bad information, right? But you can get accurate information about almost any topic within 5 seconds. That sounds pretty close to omniscience to me. Right? We're not as far away as we think we are. We still have some negative seeds to get there, to get out of the way, but come on, seriously? If people aren't rejoicing the fact that I'm sitting in my home in the middle of rural Arizona, right? And you can hear me and you can watch me and I can watch you and we can talk to each other. See, we have some people from the United States, we have some people from Colombia, we have people from Ukraine. Looks like we got some people from Vietnam, we got Taiwan, we have Mexico. Where else do we have? I don't know, I may not have said your country. Germany, I think, maybe some Austria, Belgium, right? All around the world, Canada, right? Spain. Look, we have, oh, we have Japan. Look. By the way, I didn't know you were in Japan. Let's talk because we have an event happening in December and maybe you might want to help with it or come to it. You see, we have Malaysia. We are all around the world right now and we're looking at each other. That's pretty damn cool, right? Don't think that this is normal. This is not normal for a human. Most humans, for the majority of human evolution, have lived in small little towns, right? And they only knew 100 people in their entire lifetime. Marriage was a lot easier because there's only 100 people. Like, there's only 100 people to, like, and all the different ages in that 100 people, right? You didn't have a lot of options, right? None of this Tinder bullshit. Like, thousands of people you can swipe through as potential mates, right? You didn't have that problem. There were 100 people, right? Well, maybe you didn't like any of them, then it really would be a problem. But you see, the point is that for the most of human history, we have not been able to connect with each other. Romania, I forgot to mention Romania is here too. You see. So these are pretty cool times, I would say. Where is it all coming from? That's my main point, you know. And that's the idea that when you see emptiness directly, when you have that experience, you understand how all of this is possible. And you understand how to create it. So what are some of these wrong ideas? And I've talked about it briefly in different ways, but I'm just going to go through them in a formalized way. What are some of the main beliefs, categories that we can put these ideas into? And what's really neat is these people have thought, and when you these ideas that or these categories apply to humans in most societies, regardless if it's the modern day or ancient days or middle ages or anything in between. These are the main once you understand these, then you can start seeing how other belief systems fit into it. They just go by different names. So the first major wrong idea is that there's some kind of master and a slave, that there's a me who controls me and my parts, right? there's some kind of oversoul or, you know, part of me that is in control that says, lift your left hand, speak with your mouth, blink your eyes, stand up, think things. Like there's someone who's hearing the thoughts, right? And so there's this tendency to think that there's a me or a soul or something like that that is independent of the parts of me, right? When you die, you go to heaven or you go to hell. Or if you misunderstand Buddhist teachings, when you die, you go to your next life. You think there's a you that is separate from your body and mind that then goes on to the next life. And the Abhidharma talks about it a lot. Like, oh, how does the Bardo being, right? We even talk about it this way. You go into transition, you become an in-between being, and you do your things in the Bardo, and then you get attracted to whatever being you're going to become. Then you get attracted to, let's say you're going to become a human again, you get attracted to seeing the love making, since I'm being kid friendly, right? And then you're like, ooh, that's great. And then you go there, and then you're so attracted to it, you go in there, and then all of a sudden you're in a uterus, and then you're stuck there because it's a one-way permeable membrane. Okay, you can go in, but you can't go back out, right? Love making over, sperm and egg go together, you get trapped in there, and then you become you again. And then you become a fetus, and then you grow, and then you're born, and then you live another life. That's what you think happens, right? Oh, I was a shaman in a previous life. Okay, great. And now you're a computer programmer in this life. Wonderful, right? But you think, even with that language, you think there's a you that's separate from your parts that then travels on consistently throughout the different lives. Okay. Right. But it's not quite like that, and that's why you need to study ACI 4. Okay. And I'm not going to do that today. You can go back. It's on the ACI learning platform. You can go back and watch. I think Ina and Bill are teaching it right now. I taught it a couple years ago. I think Sarani has it on there for her classes. Go watch it again or listen to Geshe Michael's classes. Okay. You can learn about that. And then you have to really think about, how does the mind move from one life to the next? And is it like a soul? Because it's not. And you have to think about it. But that's the first major tendency. You can find these belief systems that fall into this category, right? You can go to a cafe this morning and you can make a list. Or you can ask Chat GTP and it's pretty good. All right. The second one, this is what Buddhists said long, long time ago. Okay. The second one is the tendency to think of, what's the word here? Yeah. So Sotran Chame. Okay. So the idea that objective reality, the things that we see out there, are made of atoms, heartless atoms. That there's a part out there, there's something out there that's the smallest unit of physicalness, right? Which is pretty cool. That many thousand, like 2,000 years ago, they were talking about this point of view, which is what we mainly hold on to in science, right? we don't say oxygen and hydrogen are the smallest building blocks, right? Because we've learned since then that, you know, how many atoms? I need to do this hot second thing. I think it's 16. 8. Oops, I was wrong. Okay. So how many protons does an oxygen atom have? Well, it has 8, right? And then how many electrons does it have? Well, it has to, it's not a charged particle, so it has 8 electrons. Okay. What are those things made of? Right? Well, you can split them into other things, right? You can split them into smaller and smaller things. So science is now looking at smaller and smaller particles to find the God particle, is what they call it, the smallest unit of matter that creates all matter, right? By the way, an electron is not a thing. It's a potential. It has a potential to be something, and it has a potential to be in some sort of space. It's not even a thing. Unless you try to make it a thing, then it becomes a thing, then it stops being a thing. Okay. Right? You can't know you can't know if, how does it work? An electron has a potential to be in a certain space. You can't know its velocity or its what is it? Its velocity in location, right? You can know its location, but you can't know what direction it's moving in. Something like that. Okay, it's not really important. Once you observe it, it becomes something, but you can't know its totality because not all of that information is available at any given moment. Oh, okay. That's cool, right? But so there's this idea of partless pieces. Like there's a building block of everything. Smallest thing, smallest atoms, you see. You look at your chair, well, it's made of certain atoms. You look at your body, and there's certain chemical things going on in your body. If you can influence those chemical reactions, then maybe you won't get sick anymore, right? Go give me a pill, right? Oh, I need some hormone replacement. Or if I did this and I put this cream on my face and I do all these things, I won't get old, right? I was out to dinner the other night and my friend's brother, who's like 25, he asked me how old I was. And I said, well, how old do you think I am? He's like, you're like 29. And I was like, I love you. He's like, what? I was like, I love you. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, why did you think I'm 29? And he explained all the reasons why. And I was like, I love you. Right? Like, I'm not 29. And then when I told him how old I was, he was like, oh my God, you look great. And I'm like, I love you. Like, keep complimenting me. Great. Great, wonderful. I look like a 29-year-old to a 25-year-old. Okay, wonderful. Right. But that still doesn't take away from the fact that I'm not 29 anymore. Right. And my body is certainly not acting like it's 29. But if I take all these medicines and I take the right hormones and the right peptides and blah, 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 right? Then I'm never going to get old. I'm going to stay young forever. No, we know this isn't true, but we have a huge industry of people who are trying to make that true. There's no amount of cream that's going to stop you from being old. Sorry. Your face cleaning regimen when you go to bed is not going to stop the wrinkles. Maybe for a little bit. Right? And it's fine to do those things, and it's fine to feel good about yourself and take care of yourself. I'm not saying don't do it. I do it too. Why do you think I look 29? I'm not 45. I mean, I don't look 45, I look 29 because I put cream on my face every night, right? It's not true. It's not true. But that's the second belief system. The third belief system, okay, goes like this. Hold on. Let me make sure I got this right. The tendency to believe in moments of consciousness as being objective real reality, right? Our moments of awareness, right? Buddhism said there's like 65 awarenesses happening every second. So that's reality. Those 65, there's nothing between those spaces, right? There can't be something between those spaces. Like that's the smallest unit of awareness that we can have. There's 65 per second. Okay, great. Right? And we can argue this, right? Okay, well, if there's 65 parts to a second, let's take part one of 65. Does part one of 65 have a beginning? Does it have an end? Well, yes, it has to, because it started and it ended, because then the second moment of awareness happened. It had a start and it had an end. Okay, then the third one started, right? No problem. We're good. Has a beginning and end. No problem. All right, let's take that second moment that had a beginning and an end. Good. Does that between the beginning and the end, is there some duration that has to happen? Well, if it started and it ended, there had to have been some time that transversed between beginning and ending, which means you can split moment number two in half. You can split it up. Then there's two beginnings and an end. Well, I can't perceive that. Oh, well, just because you can't perceive it doesn't mean it's not there. Of course, you can split moment two in half, and you can split each of those in half. Each of those would have a beginning. You just make that unit smaller and smaller and smaller, right? Until you get to a place where you realize there's no unit of time that can't be a unit of awareness that can't be split in half. Okay, so here are the three tendencies or belief systems. One, that there's some kind of soul, right? There's some kind of me that's in control of me and that goes on after I die. Second is that, oh, there's a smallest unit of physical matter in the world. We'll call them quarks or God particles or protons. I don't know, whatever you called it 50 years ago, you'll call it something different in 150 years, right? And then the third one is the smallest unit of awareness or time. That's what makes me me. What makes me Tim is the compilation of all of these awarenesses since I was born until now, until I became 29, right? All of those things together make up me. Okay. Now, if you take those three things, go sit in a cafe and think about it for a little bit. You can put most belief systems into those three. All right. So now we're going to go into some, we're going to go into some discussions about why these belief systems, how you can break them apart in your own mind. Do not, and I beg you, do not start going up to people and telling them that their belief systems are wrong. If I catch any of you doing it, okay, do not evangelize. Do not go up to someone and say, well, you know, your concept of a soul makes no sense. Your concept of a God doesn't make any sense. Like, don't come to my door like the Mormons come to my door or the Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door to tell me about my soul and whether I should be saved or not. Okay. By the way, it's really fun to talk to them. You know, fine, have a conversation. Have, you know, bring them in. Most people say no to the Jehovah's Witnesses. Most people say no to the Mormons, right? Say yes. Invite them in for a coffee. They're good people. And just get to know them. You know, most people they probably they spend most of the day like talk about like talk about like sales rejection, right? Most of the day people say no. You know, they're people too. But don't go knocking on other people's doors, please, and tell them about why your viewpoint is better than theirs. But it really only matters to you too, for you anyway, because why do you have to see opposing viewpoints in your world in the first place? Because somewhere in your mind, those things still have a home. They still exist inside you. They're still in your seats. You're still seeing them. You may think you're a enlightened Buddhist and you think that you understand where things come from. Probably not. Okay. Somehow your seeds are still asserting themselves to create people who have wrong views, which is really your wrong view anyway. So just love them. That's my words. Just love them anyway. So what's one thing that's going on here? All right. And this is a discussion of parts and wholes, right? Are you the are you the sum of all of your parts of you, right? Are you, or are you something more, or are you something less than that, right? Okay, Tim is this 29-year-old strappingly gorgeous body. Okay. Am I my toes, my ankles, my thighs, my biceps, right? My hands, my nose, my ears, my organs, like all of those things together. Is that what makes me me? Is that what makes me a me? Is this what makes me Tim? And the question is, the middle way school will say, I'm neither any one of my parts nor the whole of my parts together. All right, let's cut off Tim's finger. All right, Tim's finger is gone. All right, am I still Tim? Okay. You know, logically, you know, like think about it. Like, how many people cut their fingernails? Or maybe you bite them, or maybe you rip them off. How many people bite their fingernails or cut their fingernails? Does anyone not? I mean, show me your hands. Yes, yeah, see, does there's nobody here who doesn't cut off their fingernails in whatever bad habit you have, whether it's chewing them or ripping them or like, you know, watching TV and clipping them, right? Or you're on the phone with your friends and anyway, you know what I'm saying, right? Very few people let their fingernails grow long. Oh, you're cutting off a part of you. No one believes that, right? You don't go, oh, there goes a part of me, right? Oh, I've lost a part of me. It's gone. No one thinks like that. There's no difference. So using that argument, there's no difference between that and losing a finger or an ear or a knee, right? Oh, where is the point at which you're no longer you? Cut off my arms and my legs. Am I still Tim? Well, I'm Tim with no arms and no legs. You're gonna have to push me around in a wheelchair. Okay. But will I still feel like Tim? I might be an unhappy Tim because I can't walk and have no arms, right? But I'm still me. Like, where is where is the line of where you stop if you cut off enough parts of you? You know, what if I took the hair from here and my belly button and my knee? Would Tim still be Tim? What if I took my left butt cheek and my shoulder and my elbow and my nose? Would I still be Tim? When do I not become Tim? Don't worry about all the blood shooting everywhere. You can watch Kill Bill. I don't care. But like, where, where is that? And so the main idea is that there's something wrong with I'm not in my finger, but I'm not in my finger. Okay. And the higher middle way will say, yes, you're all your parts, and it's the karmic seed that's putting it all together. And you have to think about it, right? Because could I still remove my arm and still have a view of Tim that's still here? Well, yes, I can. Then that arm doesn't make me anything about me. No, it doesn't. But I have an arm, right? I can show it to you. I can show you my fingernails. Look, I bit that one yesterday, right? It broke a little bit, and so I bit it off, right? But those are like, that's me. Like, there's no way you wouldn't say this is Tim's arm, and there's no way that I would say this isn't Tim's arm, right? But it's not Tim. Where is it? Like, and that's where you have to, like, you can meditate on that. The one and many. Are you one thing or are you many things? The answer is yes. It is 7:30. So let's take a break from this. I'm gonna get some coffee because clearly I need it. And we will come back in a half an hour and we will talk more about some meditation if you're still around. So thank you, translators. Thank you, tech team. Thank you, everybody. Very much appreciate you. And let's take a half-hour break. And for those of you that are leaving, say goodbye to each other and we'll see you next week.
Ciao. Please stay, Tim.
Thank you so much, teacher.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Спасибо большое. Пока.
Thank you so much.
Благодарю, дорогой Тим.
Thank you.
You.
Cảm ơn thầy Tim.
Thank you.